Custody Matters Live. Thank you for joining us for this Veterans Day edition of Custody Matters Live. And it just so happens that one of us is a veteran, and it's not me.
I bet you can't guess who.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so Caroline, you were in the military. I want you to just kind of give us a little rundown on, I want you to tell us a little bit about your experience, but I also, as it relates to time sharing, co-parenting, and custody situations, I know the military can be, so I've heard, can be really straining on a marriage. And when it
in general,
and then when you add children to the mix, it can be even more complicated.
So and then when you add parental alienation to the mix, it can be even more complicated. Yep.
Yeah, I would think that for sure, the military. Well, just share with the viewers that what it's like to be in the military and its strain on the family.
Well, I mean, that's a very general question. It never really was for me a general answer, because the entire time that I was on, I was in a program called Active Guard Reserve, AGR, and I was stationed up in Pennsylvania. And at the very beginning of when after I did my training, I was stationed there, or I was placed there, and that was when the parental alienation started, or the alienation started with my kids, and everything was going on. And I didn't have time, or, it was just, I was there. My ex left with the children, took them out to another state. I was still up in Pennsylvania. So I was being on AGR is similar to active duty, but not exactly the same thing. And I was also, just as an overview, I was in the Army for 8 years total. I had ended up transferring out of the unit that I was in due to some other things that were going on, and I was done with my tour and or the active part of it, and so I went directly into the reserves. As far as with the parental alienation piece of it, or the alienation piece of it, like I like to use, because of my I know these kids they feel very uncomfortable. At least my son told me that, so I try to stick with alienation, of blaming his dad from his perspective. But as far as that piece goes, it's like the fact that you go on tour, the fact that you're put into I've lost a lot of the wording because it's been so long, but the fact that you are sent to a war zone, or a situation, or whatever's going on somewhere else, or the fact that, like, as a reservist, if you have the weekend and you have to go for duty for the weekend, or go to AT, annual training, for 2 weeks, those are absolutely perfect opportunities for an alienator, or someone who is trying to keep your kids away from you, to use that as a reason behind that. And sure. It's not, I had somebody the other day yesterday ask me, well, how does that work with things like, EMS and first responders, and anyone who's police officers, anyone who is in that type of job, who is serving their country in some capacity, is going to have that happen to them, because it's like the perfect opportunity or setup for that to happen, just like COVID, so there's a lot of that opportunity going on. And my hope is that this kind of settles itself out, where people don't use, their anger to find ways such as this to keep their kids away from, their loving parents, because it's a nightmare. And I ended up getting out because I was trying to figure out a way between the two states that, my kids were in and that I was in, to get to them and be there more often. But that also kind of didn't work out while I was in. So
So do you think that so being in the military and did the military did you feel like that you were all alone to figure out this situation, or was the military helping you, or actually another encumbrance to having to being able to exercise your co-parenting situation?
Okay, so this is going to have to be a brave answer because part of that situation also included the other thing that I put on my post yesterday or today was that during the time that I was trying to work with my ex in connecting with my children and being able to visit them, it worked out great at the beginning. I went every weekend that I could, or with 2 or 3 weekends a month at first, and then life took over, military took over, whatever. And that didn't help anything. And then at the same time, this is going to be hard for me, but at the same time, there was also so I was being harassed, so to speak, on the parental alienation side about what I'm doing, what I'm not doing well enough, what I should be doing, all that stuff. And at the same time, having been in the military, I was also getting sexually harassed by my supervisor and harassed by the commander and the executive officer of the unit. So whenever I needed time, if something happened, whenever I needed time to go and see my kids or be there with them or something, or I needed to do something for them or whatever, or fix something that I figured I needed to fix, it was like, I was fighting both sides. I was fighting them to leave and I was fighting the others to get there, and it was like all on top of each other. It was just really, really, really overwhelming. And no, I don't, maybe a little bit they helped, or they pretended, or my supervisor pretended to support me or acted like he was supporting me, whatever. I don't even know how to explain that, but not necessarily, no.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I mean, it's your first obligation is to your country that you signed up for, and I get that. Obviously, we need a military where the people are not encumbered by that, and it does help when you have a command that's facilitative, that helps to be part of the solution. And I get that that's not necessarily their prime objective. I do know I've heard several cases where when you have a co-parent that's not really trying to facilitate things and make things easier, they get so rigid in their, our trade-off is on, Tuesdays at 4:00 or whatever, and you're just thinking, well, and that may not work with the fluidness of the schedule of the military. And yet your co-parent says, well, sorry about your luck. Mm-hmm. And that's not really acting in the best interest of the children, to not be so flexible. And what's interesting is when your family's intact, you're always being flexible, trying to work things out.
Well, I'd like to add something in there. It's very interesting that you use the words flexibility, because you have to be flexible in the military, and you also have to be flexible with the parent or the alienators or whoever's doing that part of it. So it's almost like they're both alienating at the same time, and they're alienating you because it's like this side, of course, obviously, like you say, that's part of business of the military, is to make sure that you're focused and you're there and you're on target and that type of thing. And then you're dealing with, the flexibility of having to say, okay, yeah, I have to do this here, but in the process, I'm losing my kids. And so you fight the military, which is not easy to do. And it's not a good idea sometimes. And you're fighting, you're in your fight for your kids with whoever's, whoever that's happening with. Yeah. So it's not, you're the only one who's being flexible. No one else is.
I don't know about that. Well, you're trying to, you're basically surviving it.
Yeah.
I want to share a little bit of, if I can, let me see here. Come on, I'm trying, there we go. I'll share your Facebook page with your military. Oh, so cool. There, let's turn us.
You still there?
Cool.
I lost your voice. I didn't hear anything that was said. So,
All right.
yeah.
All right.
I don't know what happened, but that's okay.
I know it was working on my end, but we'll see.
Okay.
Well,
those are actually, those pictures were actually taken during training, initial training for when I was enlisted, and then the one on the repelling the repelling one is that was when I was in officer basic school. And that was actually kind of cool. I wanted to share that because it was really neat for me to be able to, but that was the brave that I've always been, but it got knocked out of me. And it just, it just blew me away to see those pictures yesterday. And I was like, oh, okay, that's her. So, yeah. So thanks for sharing.
I know, yeah. Thanks for triggering me. Yay. Oh my God. Yeah. The thing is it is quite sad that when we deal with a high conflict situation where there's contention and custody battles and stuff like that, like the what's missing is communication, or healthy communication. Because ultimately that's at the root of how of workability, is the communication. And I get that there's definitely limitations. There's rigid things that just are immovable when it comes to the military. And oh, by the way, with an unwilling co-parent, I guess there's that same thing. So
yeah, and
it feels like you're caught in the middle of a tug of war. I can imagine.
It's probably the biggest tug of war that I think anyone could go through, on top of the alienating of the children. I mean, it's because look, we took an oath. We said we would serve our country. All that was something, I mean, and a lot of us who are having such a hard time with this are not the type of people to take an oath and say you're going to do something, just like we took the oath with the family and the children, and we took the oath with the military. So it's not an easy task for anyone to say no. However, I mean, if you do go against the military, you're going to there's going to be repercussions for that, because that's just how it's set up. So it's like, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And it already doesn't feel like there's any way out of the alienation part of it. Now there's no way out of anything. It's like you're drowning in this whole thing. And it's sad. It's demoralizing. It's shaming. It's fear-based. All of it. It's all there, and it's really, really, really challenging. And for those of you who are still in, my heart goes out to you. For those of you who are still in going through this, my heart goes out to you. There's got to be a better way, and my hope by sharing whatever I can on here will help people to see that there's life on the other side of that, for sure. But it's a big decision to make, and it's a lot of hard work to get through that and heal from it. I'll tell you what, I'm still doing it. Yeah. So yeah, that's important.
And I have tried, that's the thing, is we're creating our programs. We're creating a community platform with our core team at Kids Need Both. And that's the purpose, is to create coach-led support groups, also for to be mentors and educators in different areas of our expertise. And it's because of that very thing. There's definitely a huge gap in the military of support system. Just when my son was serving, it was kind of, I could tell that, the military has tried to create literature and a support. I know that there's an incidences of suicide, and there's just a lot of things that that add to the pressures of being in the military and stuff. So,
the good news, though, is that I'm starting to find, because when all this happened with me, it was 20 years ago. So there's a difference. I'm hearing also too that, back then when we were going through all, the things that were coming up and people were being sent to different places. Again, God, I can't remember what the words are. Anyway, so when it was happening back then, it was different, and they were gone. I mean, people were gone for like a year or two at a time, or way longer than they are now. I have found out, which I did not know, that now tours are only 6 months at a time, and they're rotating quicker, which was a huge challenge or problem when we were going in there, because I had friends of mine that literally were gone for 2.5 years, whatever it is. That causes PTSD on top of the PTSD, on top of the complex PTSD, so I'm glad that the military is actually looking into it. I mean, they usually take time. They take a lot of time to accept certain things that are going on. Like, I remember chiropractic wasn't a thought in the military's mind when I was in, many years ago, and now they're okay with it. So it does take them a while to come up to speed with that type of thing. But
don't you think that maybe because of lack of controlling, like, you've basically given your life to another control, and in a way, it, like, I have a son that I was like, man, they would thrive in the military, but there's that fear, that concern that I don't get to decide the direction of my life. And like you said, you could be sent out and deployed for a year and a half or more, and then you don't get a say in, the relationships that you have to just like say goodbye to. I mean, that's really scary for some people. And you could get some really good quality people who will like say, well, hey, maybe military is an option. But there has to be some workability. And like you said, it'd be great if there was a rotation of every 6 months, because, people can do that. And if they want to go and be deployed to Germany or whatever, like that, and then they have a family and they have the ability to take them with, and then that's certainly an option.
Yeah, and just in general, though, with any type of service, again, police, military, EMS, whatever, those types of services are very, very, very difficult to be in any type of marriage or relationship, regardless of adding onto the alienation or adding alienation onto it. It's already a challenge to be in a relationship or marriage with someone who's in the military anyway, because they're gone so much, and that's not how our relationship thrives. So, the military does the best they can with that. They have groups that are set up for them, for the wives, or, now, back then it was the military wives. Now it's just anybody, but they have groups set up that help with that stuff, but it's still not easy. I mean, people still have their emotions. They still have their, visions. They still have their mental thoughts and all that type of thing. So it's not easy, but there's options there to help, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad I did it. I'm proud of doing it for myself and doing what I could do for my country. And I'm glad I got out, because I would have never been in a place right now. I probably would be in a rubber room right now if I had stayed in and continued on in that role. And people ask me all the time, well, why'd you get out after 8 years? You only had 12 12 more years to go. And I'm like, because I couldn't do it anymore. It just didn't, my entire capacity was shot. It was done. So that's why I did it, why I got out.
All right. Well, we need to wrap up. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for serving and for your sacrifice. Thank you. And for all of the veterans out there that have served and set aside their relationships many times, have had to really sacrifice certain things, in service for our country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you
very much. All right. Well, that's all we have for Custody Matters Live. We are glad to see you, and we hope to see you next week.
Have a great day or night wherever you are.